We'll talk more about this article in a moment, but let me introduce my panel. Next to me is David Tukey. He's a former deputy regional campaign manager for McCain-Palin campaign. Good morning.
How are you? Nice to see you, Harris.
I also know you. Good to see you, too. I also know you as a scientist.
I am. Yeah, I work at NYU Medical Center.
Okay. That's neurology? Am I
neuroscience, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I thought so. And David Mercer, Democratic strategist, is joining us via satellite out of our D.C. bureau. He's probably 3 feet away from Doug Luzader, who's now unmiking himself. Good morning, David.
Good morning. Good to be with you again, Harris. Hello, David.
The tale of the two Davids. And I think that's probably where the commonalities might end. Let's talk about Egypt if we can. This president has really walked on hot coals, if you will, to try to figure out which direction to go in. How involved should we really be, this White House really be, in negotiating the departure of Hosni Mubarak?
I wanted to touch on what you mentioned a minute ago, Harris, and the idea that a transition shouldn't come too quickly. And for whatever Hosni Mubarak has done wrong, he has ruled the country for 30 years. He knows the country as well as anybody. And so the idea that things could just change so quickly, he knows that that's probably not feasible and it's not safe. And if we look at what happened after our invasion of Iraq and the violence that ensued, having a clear plan, a clear strategy, I think is the most important thing. And if he's not going to be seeking another term, we know that democracy and change are going to come to Egypt, and I think we just need to be careful about how we move forward.
Yeah, I was watching the Prime Minister make his speech on state TV, and yes, I was watching the interpreted version because I don't speak the language. So I was watching it with a little bit of a delay yesterday, and the Prime Minister said, you know, if we look at the Constitution of Egypt, it's going to take us 70 days to do any sort of a substantive change in government according to the rules and regulations. Now, my argument is they've been under emergency rule for most of my life, and those people don't have constitutional rights anyway. So I think it's kind of interesting that he'd pull the old Constitution card. David Mercer, how involved should this White House really be in negotiating his exit?
As involved as they are now, they are engaged, they're monitoring. They have Frank Wisner, who is a former ambassador with knowledge of Egypt and its importance to Israel and in the region, and the relationship with Mubarak, and understands the people. Going the timing of this, I do agree that the timetable for transition is based on the people. And we've seen other elements, including the military, that are going to be gauging whether it is going too fast or too slow. And we have to have deference to the internal domestic politics and elements in Egypt to define their timetable as they're going to define their future with more reforms going forward.
You know, I'm seeing an echo of what you guys are saying on the live chat right now. Tom in Colorado says, Harris, it depends on what you want. If you want chaos, then remove him immediately. If you want order, then move somewhat more slowly. Dwight Kavanaugh says, there are 2 sets of protesters. Which one is correct? You know, as this whole thing shakes out, and we talk about giving the situation more time, there are people dying, literally dying in the streets. So I don't know how you can negotiate for more time and a smoother transition when you have bloodshed. Yep. How do you do that?
While we all don't want to see further loss of life, we have to be grateful both for the military not being drawn in, for them not going against the protesters, and the fact that this has not gotten totally out of control to this point. And we have to keep hoping for that, as well as going back to U.S. involvement, and I'm sure with others, where we can be helpful in nudging or cajoling or helping to move this further so that there is no further loss of life.
And can this Vice President Suleiman maybe do something? You know, when he was speaking yesterday, and I misspoke, I said Prime Minister, it was the Vice President who was speaking yesterday. The Defense Minister spoke this morning. When Suleiman was speaking yesterday on state television, he said, and he was really kind of brutal at times. He blamed foreigners, basically us. He blamed businessmen, and he blamed anybody other than the government for what's happened there, outsiders getting involved. What does that communicate to you? I think
his background, I believe, he was an information officer.
Yeah, he's military.
Yeah, he's military. And It's unfortunate, but I think that, as I said before, they know what needs to be done to keep things relatively in order. And I thought that the step that they took to say that the military was not going to move in on the protesters was a huge step, and hopefully they'll be able to stick to that and just keep things in order as much as they can.
Yeah, Scott is pushing back on you, David Mercer. Say what? Not out of control. The journalists are being attacked. Yeah, we know that all too well.
But it could be a whole lot worse than it is, as we all know. And
it could be worse, but it's pretty darn bad.
Yeah, certainly.
Okay, so let's get down to some brass tacks, maybe bottom line here. So today is a big day. It's the day of prayers. As we saw last week, things really ramped up after the afternoon prayers on a Friday. Do we just sit and watch this weekend? You hear about the White House negotiating. We know that the presidents, both Obama and Mubarak, had a 30-plus minute phone call this week. I didn't see anything change after that phone call. The world, I don't know. I'm seeing on the Post, I'm hearing arguments. Are they really listening to us?
There were some changes there, Harris, in his announcing that he wouldn't run for re-election, that his son would never be...
That wasn't in response to Obama, though. David Tukey, go ahead.
Well, just yesterday, it was further added that his son would not be a successor to his administration. You also, we have to look at other countries that have a stake in this as well. And Turkey, the Prime Minister, Erdogan, had actually called for the ouster of Mubarak and for him to step down. So there's a chorus, hopefully that will find itself in harmony, that provides an environment with the least cost in lives, as well as, not to say that it's the same, but for Mubarak to make a quiet, safe face exit so that transition can go on in the imagination of the people and what has caused them to take to the streets today.
I think this is about the collective consciousness of the protesters at this point, and the fact that a group of people banding together has gotten this president to not run for a second term and not have his son take over. That's a major step, and whether that is something that will be satisfying. Can you imagine that happening
in this country? President standing up and saying, you know what? I hear you guys over health care, that you're angry. I hear Tea Partiers in this country not happy with the rate that we're spending. If I can't get it right, I'm just not going to run again.
And neither are Sasha and Malia. Yeah, I can't imagine that happening.
Okay, I'm just talking fantasy. And fantasy for people like Robert Pickel says, the bottom line is, it's up to the Egyptians to figure this out. Obama has little influence. Get real. And I think there are 7 exclamation points here. I don't know if you...
I agree with it.
If you live in a country where you can't even fathom anything like this happening, how can you really give advice? It's like and no offense to anybody, but it's like a bald hairdresser telling you how to wear your bangs.
Well, I agree in that, look, we have a financial stake through our foreign aid, a lot of it military. I think that is reflected in some of the posture you see of the military in having restraint. They're keeping watch so that clashes don't get totally out of control. And I think that in part does illustrate or reflect an influence that we do have, as well as referring to other countries in the region that do so as well.
All right. One last thing on this. Franklin Senior Meek writes, UN peacekeeping going on in Egypt? Not that I know of.
Yeah, not that I know of either.
That's a good question. I don't know as well.
Not that I know of. I think we would have heard that. ATT Net says UN and peacekeeping are oxymorons. Okay, let's move on to healthcare real quickly, because I know, David Mercer, you're going to have to jump off the satellite bird here in just a second. The Senate getting ready to deal with the repeal of healthcare. Real quickly, Democrats, how tight is the vice on you guys?
Is that addressed to me? I'm sorry.
Yes, that's you, David Mercer.
It's not a fight. Look, we've always said, and the Obama administration has been clear about this, that and he said it in his State of the Union address, that there is always room for improvement and that there is going to have to be tweaking of the legislation, as well as they're going through it now through rulemaking, and why the bill doesn't fully take effect until 2014. And so you're going to see adjustments, as you are in the 1099 bill that you'll see coming forth.
Which affects small business. businesses.
Small businesses with regard to IRS reporting, yes.
Okay.
And so you're going to see some tweaking, but if you're hinting at repeal, I don't see it, despite the court cases which are breaking even right now, and albeit we'll probably go to the Supreme Court.
Okay, your last thought, David Tukey?
Just the irony, Harris, that this president, his kind of main experience before becoming president was as a constitutional law professor. And now his signature piece of legislation is being ruled unconstitutional.
Wow, I haven't heard anybody say
Well,
that.
there were challenges to civil rights and other pieces of legislation through the courts as well, and finally locked in stone. So it's not the first.
Well, I think that as you look at this piece of legislation as a whole, there are definitely pieces of it that need to be changed. The thing that's been frustrating is that Republicans have been portrayed as people who don't want everyone in this country to have health insurance. We do. It's just a matter of doing it in a practical way, and this bill doesn't accomplish that.
David, I would agree. They shouldn't be thought of as that, but when they say repeal and don't have any thing to put forward in replacing that, it leaves people with the impression that they don't care about people's provisions for health care.
All right, this is, and I figured it would be, we'd go back and forth on this. It will be very interesting to see what happens in the Senate. We've seen some Democrats, West Virginia's Joe Manchin talking about the fact that he will vote for repeal, potentially. We've seen some Democrats looking ahead to the next Senate elections and saying, I don't know, I might want to politically protect myself. I saw how deadly health care was the last time around. Don't want it to drag on no matter what happens. Neither party wants to still be talking about this in, say, April. As we approach the debt ceiling in the next 60 to 75 days, you don't want to be talking about something that costs even more money. It's tricky. I ask you how tight the vice is. With all due respect, Mr. Mercer, you walked around it. We'll see. Have a great weekend. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Harris. Take care, David.
All right, we'll see you soon.
Nice to meet you, David.